My series is called Different Than Me, where I interview people who are different than me. In this case, I'm doing a mini series on my sister, and it's called No More Strokes. And the idea is to have her have no more strokes and to educate all of you and us, and to be able to be a community to share what it's like and what a person might need, and to share some different perspectives so we can be better advocates. And so in this first one, she had a small stroke at 43, and then the one she's describing now is at 45. And then 2 weeks after I filmed this, she had another stroke. And she's going to talk about that stroke, the hemorrhagic stroke, and how she knew it was a stroke and described it, which also may be helpful to you because she didn't show all the signs that you normally would think of. And she'll talk about the out-of-body type experience that you hear from other stroke survivors as well. She talks about learning how to walk and advises to work hard in that window of time with your PT. And she thinks 3 hours was a great time to shoot for, so you can recover faster. And she made a very fast recovery. She talks about her decision about Clonezapam. Her arm does this. It's called dystonia, and it's kind of out of control, and also throws her off. It makes it hard for her to walk. And so the debate on should you take some drugs, Clonezapam, and just some of the decisions that she has to ponder. So that's going to be the first episode. Hi, I'm Jolene. This is my sister Tracy. And I thought I would take advantage of this opportunity. She had a stroke at age 45?
Probably.
Okay. Maybe that has affected her stroke has affected her, maybe. But the idea is to, what I want you to get out of this, or what I want to get out of this, is when someone does have a stroke, what's it like, and what can the rest of us do about it? Because when this happened, she's young. Well, she's kind of young now, but I'm younger. But it's like, what do you do, and what is it like? There's so many things to have to juggle. So I think we should start with when it happened. So it was almost 2 years ago?
Right.
What were you doing?
Yeah, 2.5 years ago. So it was in November, 2.5 years ago. And I was working out of the gym across the street, a very hard workout with, it's running around in the center, but with kettlebells and weights and very fast pace. And my hand was just fell like dead asleep. Like 1 minute I was doing weights and suddenly my hand was asleep. And so it not tingly, like numb. And so I started, kind of rubbing it. I told the teacher, who's, they're like 22, and and not, they're leaving exercise class, not doing first aid.
Sure.
Okay. So anyway, she said, "Oh, why don't you go sit down and just kind of chill?" And so I went and sat down, and then it kind of creeped up, another, really, it was like 2 inches, and my wrist was totally asleep. And so I just said to the guy sitting there, the staff, said, "Okay, I'm having a stroke, call 911." And he said, "You are?" And I said, "Yes," like really confident, like I know anything. And I know, I have no idea why I said that. But I was right. And so they laid me down in an office. And as I sat there, it just went further. And then, a couple minutes longer, it went further. And so by the time the ambulance came, it was very clearly a stroke because of the sightedness. But I didn't have any of the typical stroke symptoms. And so that was interesting to me because they have those things like on the fridge that you can do, right? Oh, this is the stroke symptoms to watch for, like the mouth drooping, and you can move your tongue back and forth and see if it's equal. That may or may not have been the case. I didn't have a mirror. But I could speak fine, and I was clear thinking. Right, like I got in the ambulance, I was still thinking, but I don't remember arriving at the hospital. So that's where my mind just kind of tuned out. But it was good that I was clear thinking because on that day, my husband was out of the country and my kids were at school, and Jessica had just started that school about 2 months ago. So we just really didn't know many people. Josh had been there a year, but we just didn't know people. So I said, "Okay, here's my phone. Call these people." And I gave them 3 names of friends who live like half an hour away. So that wasn't maybe super clear thinking. But I gave them that and said, "Take care of that." you go get my purse. I live across the street. Here's the code to get in my house. This is where my purse is.
Oh my god.
So yeah. So and she just was like, okay, bye, and she just took off running, and she was probably back in, I mean, pretty close to a minute or 2 minutes. Like I just ran across the street and ran back. But I didn't have anything on me except my purse. I didn't have any kind of ID. I didn't have insurance, credit card, nothing. So, so she got my purse back, gave me my phone back, and I rushed off to the hospital. And the kids got picked up and were actually I don't remember where they were taken, but they went to someone's house. They didn't know why they were at someone's house. No one knew what was happening. They just knew they were supposed to pick up my kids. So, yeah, so it was pretty amazing. So I got to the hospital, and I was alone, but I don't remember any of it, so I don't know what happened in the hospital. But my friend did come to the hospital. The one friend went and got the kids. The other one said she was also getting kids. Luckily, they're both friends, and they talked. Good. Because they're driving half an hour. And so the one went to the hospital to see me. She's a nurse, and so she's able to talk medical and was able to get back in because normally a non-family member can't go in. And she explained that my husband's out of the country and I have no other family. And
also in Paris where there were bombings, I'm like, where's your husband?
Yeah, so he was following the bombings. So there's one in Paris, there's one in Germany in the football stadium. And then he was going to Belgium where the terrorists were from. Like he was following the bombs and then he was heading to Israel. And I did attempt to communicate, please don't bother him because he's going to Israel and he's never been there, and I think that's really exciting.
That is important. That's good.
Yeah, so Melissa, my friend who was at the hospital, said, yeah, we got it handled. And she called Ray, and she didn't quite know what to do because she's like, I think he needs to know about this, but for some reason she not wanted to tell him. And so she called and left him this really weird message. So, and that was probably like at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, but there it was night. And so then she ended up going home and went to bed. When Ray got up, it was in the middle of the night here, so he couldn't call anyone because he didn't know where I was or what was wrong. So he didn't know I was at the hospital, so he couldn't call and get updates. So he had to spend that whole day just kind of waiting for someone to wake up and talk to him. And then he had to try to get a flight out of Paris. And there wasn't anything until that evening. So
there was bombings. I think you remember that. There were bombings. It was just crazy.
Right. So they said the French borders were closed, but either we don't agree on the terminology or something. I mean, he's like, no, I just wrote the train in. Like, they didn't even check anything. So the world was hearing the borders were closed. But the reality was fine.
So Ray did get out of Paris.
So he got out of Paris. So it probably took him maybe 24 hours to leave, and then he had to fly all the way across. And he flies out of LA sometimes because they're better flights, and so he flew into LA. So he's like exhausted at this point, and then had to drive down here and just drove straight to the hospital. So he arrived, like, I remember him coming, so it was around 2 a.m. and I couldn't talk at that point. I was still would try to say something, and it did make sense. So, but my mind knew that. Like, I knew I wasn't making sense. I knew what I wanted to say, but I couldn't speak.
So it sounds like it. So just there was numbness. It creeped all the way here, numb, and the rest of your body numb, and then your head. You were not thinking clearly, and you're aware of it.
Well, I was thinking clearly.
Oh,
you
weren't
speaking clearly.
You weren't coordinating.
Yeah, but there's probably 24 hours in the hospital that I can't recall at all. So I've talked with Melissa and like what happened, and I can look at my records, but I don't know that there was actually medical intervention that happened because in a clot they have to get you right away and break up that clot. So that's why they say if you're having a stroke, get to the ER because every minute counts. Because in a clot, the timing is really critical.
So I didn't know what was. I live in Seattle. And she was in San Diego, and so hemorrhagic stroke. So that was the burst in your brain?
Me, yeah. I had hemorrhage.
And so then it deprives oxygen getting to some important place, right? So is that...
I don't know. There were doctors there.
Okay. so that's my understanding. I was watching a ton of Khan Academy education to learn, well, what is it? And so, the quicker you move, because what I recall was like if that oxygen doesn't get to that part of your brain, then your brain starts to die or something like that.
So. I believe that part of the definition of having a stroke is oxygen not getting to your brain.
Oh,
Okay,
there
I
you
was
go.
just discussing this with Ray yesterday because people talk about different things. I'm like, but like your brain bleeding, and I'm like, isn't that what happened to me? Isn't that a stroke? But they weren't worried about it at all. They let this lady fly an airplane, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But there's different kinds of things that happen in your brain that sound like a stroke, but they aren't. So I was like, what is a stroke? So I think he was saying it's more of whatever I just said.
Yeah, well, moving on. I'm not going to remember. So it's been a couple of days now, and are you aware of what's happening?
Yeah, so, I mean, I knew, when I woke up, I knew what had happened. I didn't forget anything.
Yeah.
Well, I might have forgot those 24 hours or so.
Yeah.
But then the next, like, clear thing I remember is that during the next day, Melissa was in to visit me, and she was like, do you need me to do anything for you? And I was trying to speak, and I needed to order a photo book, and it was very urgent that it was done that day.
She has her priorities.
It was a gift for the football coach, and the banquet was coming up.
Yes,
And
I remember that, actually.
Yes, it was a really big deal, and I really couldn't communicate it. So we're kind of doing a charades type of communication, and she said, you know, what do you need? And I said all kinds of weird things, so I couldn't get the right words to come out, and I was just so frustrated. I just turned away, and yeah, I don't want to talk about this anymore. But the next day, I was able to say shutterfly, and then that just got the ball rolling. And so they were able to order the book. The coach got his book. It was great. So then in the hospital, I was there for 4 days, I believe, in the ICU or wherever you go in the hospital. And then they transferred me to the rehab hospital. So that's a different facility. It's next door in this case, but it's a rehab facility where you're working with your OT, PT, and speech therapist 3 hours a day. So
pause on the physicality here. Mm-hmm. So at that point, you're all numb. Your right side is all numb.
Yeah, I was on my right side. I was basically paralyzed. I mean, I really couldn't do anything. I don't know technically if I was paralyzed. I don't know if I could wiggle my fingers, but I couldn't do anything useful with my right side.
Like you didn't have control of it.
Right.
Could you feel anything, or hard to say?
Well, I would say no, just because I can't really feel anything now. So.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Okay. So you moved. Yeah. Okay, 4 days you moved over. Then you're working with a speech therapist and.
Right. So I got in there, and honestly, at 4 days, I was speaking probably the same as now. But speech therapy is so much more than speech. So the speech part, they did not help me with at all. They didn't even try to. It was all like puzzles and stuff for your brain. Like, can you do things? And so they gave me a Sudoku that was 2x2 or really small. Maybe 3x3, but like really small. And I was like looking at it, I was like, wow, this is interesting because Sudoku is not hard for me, and this is challenging. Like, I had to really think hard to be able to figure out which number went where, and I knew that it was challenging for me and it shouldn't be. So I was very aware of my limitations, but there was like, okay, wow, this is hard. But then we started getting to logic puzzles, and he'd be like, oh, yeah, you don't need that one. He'd get harder and harder, and I was actually doing better than my therapist. So then he wasn't... So actually, he had a stroke before. So then I was trying to be, I'm so nice, and so I wouldn't tell him the answer. Because I felt bad.
And I remember she was saying that, I don't know, it was spelling or something. Or no, it was answers with one of the nurses or something, and she didn't know, and then you knew. Anyways, I just remember that, yeah.
Yeah. So my mind came back pretty quick overall. There's definitely, like, I've already a couple times started to forget my train of thought, which anyone will say, okay, at this age, you're just forgetful, but I'm not. That wasn't one of my things. Like, I have a very sharp mind. I have an amazing memory, I still actually keep my schedule primarily in my head. I do write it down to double check, but I know, but I might wake up one day, like today, I was like, what do I have going today? But I had nothing. That was the point because I had my family here. But I was like, why don't I have anything on my today. But then I look at my calendar, I'm like, oh, hang out with family.
So when you think about your abilities and like some of the abilities that you are now missing, like what? Yes, we want to talk about the positive, and we will. But what are you missing? So in terms of your right side, so show us your right hand. Okay, so you have control of it. Can you? What can you? And
I don't use it, but I can. I mean, I can pick up a coin, but you can. It's really hard because it's hard for me to make them match. But this is so. When I had the stroke, I had to learn and practice these things. Okay, so it was much worse. So at first, it was like to pick up something big, I had to like really work hard. But with all the PT and OT over the first year, I was at about a year. I remember thinking, in 6 months I'll be all better. That like I was on a good path, and within probably like a week after that, I started getting worse. And from what I understand, strokes don't get worse. It's a one-time event in your brain, and then you just get better because you just keep. But you don't get worse because it's just that one event. It's not like my brain is still bleeding. So I went back to the neurologist and said, "What's going on?" Because I have now this tremor. So I have to stop my arm. And they not had good neurologists, and they have been basically useless, and as just say, okay, well, we don't know. But I finally went to another 5th neurologist, and he said, oh, I know what this is. After you have a stroke, your brain is kind of resting, and as you're healing, it's also kind of resting and going, just dealing with it. But then as it starts to regrow, those nerves regrow, and instead of growing the way they're supposed to, they grow around the place. And so when they regrow, then it has something to do with that. This has something to do with that. Like it's overactive or something.
So you're growing nerves back.
Yeah. So there can be healing in amongst nerves. Nerves can heal. But according to my acupuncturist, they heal like 10 times slower. So he's like, when I'm working with someone who's got a muscle problem or, different things, it's quick. Like it might take going there once and he's, or whatever. But he's like, okay, for this stuff is going to take 10 times as long to not necessarily see a difference. I see a difference, but to get healing, it takes a lot longer. It's a lot slower. So you need to be patient.
So can you see that I'm touching you? Can you feel this?
No.
Okay.
That I can feel.
You can feel your thigh?
But there's like 8 kinds of touch or something that someone told me. So there's like very soft, like petting. Okay, I can feel that. Okay. Yeah, I can feel that.
Okay.
And then there's pounding, and I can kind of feel that. I mean, that I can't feel as much. I can feel the impact it has on my body. Okay. So if I'm standing, I'd probably not fall over, but.
Okay.
And then like, pinprick. Mm-hmm. And that I can feel. I can feel heat, so I don't think I will burn myself because I can feel heat and cold. But whatever, I don't know what the kinds of touch are, but there's some things I can feel and some things I can't. But that stroking or that slow, I can feel that.
Let's see. Like, so for the right side, like, your face is not dragging at all, like right side.
It's different though. Like this side is so much puffier. To me, it's super obvious, but I can't see it as much as I can feel it. But my shape is different. Like the shape of my face, one side can curve one way and the other side curves the other way. So I can feel that it's just puffier.
So your eyes are fine, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like the right side of your tongue, is it? I mean, can you
they have totally different feeling. Like sensation is different, like right down my tongue. So everything is like right down my body. So everything on the right feels swollen. So
Can you touch your ear?
Can you touch it?
I've never touched your ear before. Yeah. Do you feel that?
I feel it. Yeah, that doesn't feel good. Yeah. So like this. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell if I can feel it or if I can see it.
Yeah,
I know I'm doing it, so it's hard to say. But there's a difference. If I tend to only chew my food on the side, so I consciously push it to this side. Otherwise, this side of my body I have to consciously do things with, because I like this hand I don't use anymore, but I need to, and so I will put a knife in this hand and try to do something which is really hard.
So how? Because I remember you could hold things, but for not very long, and for how much pressure can you?
Yeah, not much. I mean, if I do, I'm squeezing a lot with my left hand.
Okay.
Like I'm basically doing the work with my left hand, but letting my right hand pretend like it's. I mean, it's kind of like working with a 1-year-old or 2-year-old that they're not even helping. Like a 4 or 5-year-old, they're helping, and you're doing it together. But this is like, my right hand's not really helping it. And I can carry things with my right hand. It has to be something that I don't want to damage, so I can't carry paper. Like, because I will immediately crush it. Like, I can't hold it without crushing it, or anything breakable. I can't hold a paper coffee cup in my right hand because I will crush it.
So not knowing sensitivity, like
right? I can't. There's no feedback to it, so I don't. I put my hand around it and look at it and say, "Okay, I think I'm okay," and immediately I take my eyes off it and I crush it. Yeah. And I'm very strong on my right side because, I think because of this movement. Right, my muscles are constantly moving.
Oh, because they're...
This side, I can sit my arm down and it can rest. This side can't rest, really. Although I sleep fine. And that was interesting. The neurologists were like, it doesn't bother you for sleeping at all. And they've been a little surprised. But if I'm laying down, my body is fine and quiet. I mean, and this arm, if I set it down, well, right now, it's just going to keep pulsing. So...
I don't see it pulsing.
Yeah, but I can... I mean...
Oh, I see it. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
You see it? Oh.
So, yeah. And throughout the day, that changes. Like, certain times of the day, I don't know when, but it'll be calm and relaxed. But as it gets later in the day, I guess, it gets more tense. And so, like, the acupuncturist has been working on that. He's like, these muscles, when I first went in, were super, super tense, like right up here. And now they're not. But this side is... my good side, but this side, I have tendonitis in my shoulder and my wrists from overuse of this part of my body. So it's actually, I think it's gone now. But that was interesting because that was pretty painful, both in my wrists and shoulder. So I was like, okay, then I really don't have any hands to do anything if I do both. And now that, it used to be, when we grew up, it was, when you feel pain, you just work through it, push through it, but now it says if you feel pain, stop, because it's your body talking to you, and it's saying you need to stop and, relax or stretch or do something.
How long was it before you walked? Because that was very exciting.
Yeah, so on the 4th day or 5th day, I went to the rehab hospital, and the very first day, I went on a Saturday, so Sunday. So the second day, they got me into rehab, and so PT, they're like, you're going to walk. So... I was like, okay, whatever. I was very laid back. I was not angry like most of the patients there. And so I was like, sure, whatever. And so they got me standing up, and they had my PT and my PT assistant and 2 aides helping me. So we had one lady holding my belt, and then people on either side of me and in front of me making me walk, which was them... propelling me forward because I couldn't use this side of my body at all. So they were lifting my knee and my leg as if it was walking, but I was doing no work and I couldn't feel that. So it was really interesting because I'm watching the situation. I mean, it's almost like an out-of-body experience, so I can't feel it. And so you're watching this and I'm like, oh.
Good job, guys. Way to go. You got this.
They did that. So I had an hour of PT, and this PT was... fabulous. It was so good, and I think she doesn't have a good reputation because most patients do not want to work, and they're resistant because she makes you do hard work. Like I would leave just sweating, and but I never said no to her, and so she loved me as a patient because I would do whatever she said. And now that first day, of course, I just did whatever they did to me, and but then the next day they got me up and did that, and I think that day already we only had 3 people, and within by a week from the stroke, I was able to, kind of walk on my own. So I didn't leave the hospital for 3 weeks, and at that point I was able to walk on my own, but just barely. Like, we weren't sure if I'd make it up the stairs, or we were, question marks. But they made sure I could walk before they sent me home. So it was quick. Like, every day they're like, oh my gosh, like, we cannot believe how far you've progressed since yesterday. And it's not like I practiced. And that's the one thing that I would encourage people to do, is to help the patient practice. I had 3 hours of therapy a day, and I knew that didn't seem like much. It was like 3 hours. Oh my gosh, that's a lot. And I was like, but I've got all day, and I was just sit there doing nothing. So, you're awake for what? I don't know, 15 hours, 12 hours of doing nothing, and 3 hours of therapy. And Mom was there all day. Ray probably wasn't, because he had to work and take care of the kids, but he'd come in like in the evenings, and the kids would come in, and I had friends coming like all day. I'd have like 5 to 10 friends come every single day. And if each one had said, hey, let's like squeeze the ball, the therapy ball, I can't imagine what my progress would have been if I'd had that going on too. And I don't know if you'd have to okay that with the hospital. No one suggested any of that at all. And it wasn't until at least 6 months later, when I started reading books about strokes, that I realized that there could have been more that was done. But I don't know, maybe your body does need to rest, because it was very physically exhausting. And I was fine, because, I don't know, you can't feel that much, so it just wasn't that exhausting to me. But it's probably hard on my body, whether or not I could tell that or not.
So some of that knowledge, though, because I remember you saying, I wish somebody would have said to work really hard. I know that she was working hard, but I think you were saying work even harder, that recovery time is a short window.
Right. You have 3 months after a stroke where you have this really fast recovery, and then after 3 months, it slows down. And then for up to about a year, it's still, recovery is happening. And I think the doctors would say that that's the end. Like, you have a year. But I think that anyone who's not a doctor and is helping people recover from strokes will say it's never, that your brain is continually renewing itself and growing. And I have a friend whose grandfather had a stroke, and it was 10 years after the stroke. One day he's sitting in the living room, and he said, I feel the carpet for the first time since the stroke. 10 years later, he regained feeling in his foot. So I was like, okay, yeah. This has been very interesting, me in the medical field. I've always been fine with doctors. I've not had any issues, but I've also not dealt with anything hard. But I watch people who are so angry at the medical field and having all kinds of problems. And that wasn't my experience. I believe they were having these problems and these limitations. And this is where I have firsthand seen that, and just realized that doctors are not going to be the ones to help me. And neurologists are generally not nice people, and they're not caring. Like, that's, everyone, whenever I talk about neurology or neurologists, everyone's reaction is, oh, you got to deal with them. They know they know a lot, but I think that it's probably because of the way healthcare is set up. They just don't have the time, or don't get paid for the time to really seek answers. And when you're a strange case like mine, that there's a lot of things that are unusual in mine that just don't fit a mold. And so I've probably been in 5 times, and they just are like, yeah, whatever, like
you're fine.
Like, I'm the one guy said you're fine. I'm like, do I look fine? If I was your family, would I be fine? You're kind of like, what are you talking about? And yeah, I think I've been to 5 neurologists, and the last 2 actually had ideas on what to do. I didn't agree with them, so I didn't do them, because they're putting me on really horrible drugs. And I was like, if I was in pain or if I was impaired beyond what I am right now, I would absolutely consider that. I'm not anti-drug, but this drug is, I don't know what it's called, but it's something that would go on for life, and it's addictive, both physically and mentally, and it just sounds awful. And it's primarily used as an antidepressant, but they use it for tremors as well. So kind of like, what are we doing here? Like, what is this? Right. But they didn't. The first guy who gave me a prescription said, "Oh, here, take this drug," and like, okay, you can go. And I was like, oh, is it addictive? I could think my things. Is it addictive? He's like, yeah. And then I left, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll Google it. You're like, shoot.
Thanks.
So, I Googled it, and it's very addictive. And I talked to a friend who just recently came off it after I think she's been taking it for 15 years. And she said it took her an entire year to get off the drug, and it was torture. And I was like, oh my gosh. He just told me to take it like it's, here, go take an aspirin. So, but then the next guy I talked to, he said the same thing. He's like, here, go ahead and take this drug. You need to take it because if you want to get rid of the tremor. And the tremor is okay. It's just not that big a deal. So, but they didn't ask me that. I mean, part of the question should have been, does it bother you? I mean, is it interfering with your life? And I don't think getting rid of the tremor will change how much I can use this arm. So if I got rid of the tremor and then could cut things, I mean, that would be amazing. If I got usefulness, but if I just reduce the tremor, it doesn't change anything.
You're impacting adding poison, etc.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you know there are 800,000 strokes a year in the U.S.? Out of those 800, 600,000 of them are the first-time brain attacks. The other 200,000 or so are the reoccurring strokes. And 140,000 die each year. 75% of the people, the stroke survivors, are over 65. And guess what? 80% of these are preventable. So what's the problem? Certainly, I don't know anything about strokes. I certainly know a little bit more now, but we don't know about it. And so it's that lack of awareness. So I'm going to do my best to share with you at least what I learn. Hopefully we can learn from each other to learn about strokes so we can reduce the number of strokes here. I mean, 80% preventable, we ought to be able to do something. I'm producing a mini series called No More Strokes. This is inspired by my sister who had a stroke at 43, 45, and 47. And that is 1 month ago, I did an interview with her. And she had the stroke 2 years ago. And then 2 weeks later, she had another stroke. And then today, I talked to her. She told me she was just in the ER. So the doctors have no idea why she's had 3 strokes. And so let's crowdsource this and figure it out. And for those of you who don't know me or my sister, what's in it for you is you can get educated here so then you can help somebody you love or even a stranger to recognize a stroke. Also how to prevent it with nutrition, etc., looking at your family history and aftercare, like during the stroke and the recovery, to give you some perspectives on it and resources so you know what to do. My family and I, we have no clue what to do. And still, I have a better understanding 2 years later. I have a little bit more understanding of what to do, but we'll figure it out. And so that's what this series is about. And out of the 6 neurologists that she spoke to and the different people, they don't know why. And it seems like a lot of people don't seem really to care. And so what I've learned is that you really have to take this into your own hands and really fight for yourself and gather your team together and look into things. So I'm asking you to send your ideas. A number of ideas have come from my different friends to look at talk to a hematologist, physiatrist, interventionist, look into hyperbaric chambers, acupuncture, a stroke specialist, and all these different things that we didn't know about. And alternative or not, throw the ideas this way. Maybe something will work, and I want to put together this big plan of different solutions and then research and figure it all out. So the goal is no more strokes, certainly for my sister, and maybe you can use these ideas to bat around with somebody to equip yourself so you can help somebody or yourself.